Two, that those who are using them have knowledge on how best to use them. That is not to say that there will not be instances where readings may vary. That's likely. It could be because of differences in the way people are using the gadget, or it could even be a defect with the gadget itself. But remember, temperature is one of those symptoms that we look for. Beyond that temperature, there are other things that we look for also, clinical signs, if one is actually suffering from COVID-19. So we are aware that there is a need to be able to closely monitor and ensure that those gadgets that are being used are performing the right task and giving us the right temperatures that we need to see. So let me now hand over to the DG to respond to some of those questions that came to him. DG.
Thanks, Waziri. Let me start by Graham, who asked a question about modeling again. Definition: modeling is the science of predicting or projecting disease trends or patterns based on a given set of data. And remember, initially when we were doing these projections, we were basing our data on events outside the country, maybe from China, Europe. Now that we have done more than 3 months with the disease, we are using more and more of our data to assist us in our modeling. And you have seen with the time that what we tell you here vis-a-vis what we project, there's no much variation. And the data that we are currently using, amongst other things, include the characteristics of the patients who get the disease, e.g. whether they are symptomatic, asymptomatic, how many persons can you be able to pass the disease to in case you are infected, also known as the R-naught, and how basically you apply the containment measures that we have put in place, including how you use your masks, how you do the hand washing, and maintaining physical and social distancing. So we can confidently state that going forward, we are having more locally generated information, which we are using to be able to model, and which reflects the reality of the Kenyan situation, instead of what used to happen when we used to base our modeling on data from China and other places. And going forward, that simply tells you that things are falling into place as projected. You remember some time back we told you that going forward, late June, July, it will not be unusual to see more than 200 cases reported on a daily basis, and I think that is what is obtaining as of today. For the students who came from Sudan, yes, of course there is what we call patient confidentiality. These are cases that we have reported from Mombasa, but we didn't disclose that these people actually came from Sudan, but they are captured in our line list. Testing for COVID, yes, as Waziri said, is a good practice based on the clinical judgment of the clinician and also circumstances regarding the death of the diseased person. It is better to err and test even posthumously and protect the immediate family members and the rest of the society or community, rather than leave it to chance, and then people fail to take appropriate infection prevention control measures that then will be able to expose a larger proportion of the population. The conditions, yes, predominantly those who die, majority of our patients have more than 2 conditions. And usually we have more than 2 existing conditions, majority being with diabetes and hypertension. That is the highest risk factor for COVID mortality, followed by diabetes alone, then hypertension, then other conditions including cancer. So that is why Waziri was emphasizing the need for those with coexisting conditions to continue visiting the health facilities for filling of their prescriptions, for assessment, so that we ensure that their control is good. We had a presentation today and something came out very interestingly, that for those who are HIV positive, the risk of COVID death is minimal. And we presume this is because most of our people who are on ART, antiretroviral therapy, are adhering to the treatment and therefore achieving viral suppression, and therefore their immune system is as good as those who are not HIV infected. And we want to applaud them for that, and also appeal to those who have other existing conditions like diabetes and hypertension, that adherence alone to the prescribed medicines will make your exposure much reduced, and therefore risk of death, even if you were to get COVID-19, significantly reduced. So the issue of stigma, yes, is a big problem, more so especially with the containment measures that are in place, because stigma will lead to further isolation, and with isolation, and that will lead to either anxiety or depression. Yesterday we engaged Kenyans under the Ask the DG platform, and our main focus was mental health. And what we need to do as Kenyans is to, one, demystify the myths and misconceptions regarding COVID-19 so that we convey the correct information. Number two, we must develop coping mechanisms, that even if I'm diagnosed as COVID-19, I must have my coping mechanism either from my close family members or close friends. Then you need to verify where you get your information. Either you get information from a verified source like Ministry of Health, WHO, CDC. Also, don't listen too much to the information that makes you unhappy. So if you think CNN is airing too much of COVID deaths, please flick off to another channel. So those are some of the measures that you need to put in place to ensure that you can be able to overcome this stigma. But we are working together with the counties to ensure that we scale down mental health services to the lowest level possible through the community health volunteers, so that they become the first aiders for mental health, so that they can be able to support those who test COVID positive. This does not require any unique training, including all of us who are here. We can quickly be sensitized on mental health, first aid, so that we can be able to support the rest of our families and friends. I think the issue of the thermogans was adequately addressed by Waziri, but that notwithstanding, Kenya Bureau of Standards, which is the body authorized to ensure that the standards are met, is of course on the lookout for anything in the market that does not meet the required standards, and they'll be able to take appropriate action. Remember also, because we are dealing with a pandemic, there are very many people who will come with all sorts of goods and services to be able to peddle around. So it is important that we have an oversight in terms of the machines and equipment that we use, that they are properly calibrated and they reflect the correct position, because any misjudgment using those tools could lead to a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maagizo ambayo tunapewa na Wizara ya Afya kuhusu ugonjwa wa coronavirus. Tunaambiwa pahali pana watu wengi lazima tuweke distance, yani kuweka hatua mita 1 kwa mwenzako. Ukienda kwa matatu, weka distance. Ukienda kwa soko ama palipopote mkusanyiko wa watu, ni vizuri uweze kupeana hiyo social distance ili tuweze kumaliza maambukizi. Tukifuata haya masharti ama maagizo ambayo tunapewa na Wizara ya Afya, hakika tutaangamiza corona virus na hali yetu ya kawaida tutairudia. Asanteni sana.
July 28, 2020, the following business will be prioritized, and that will be consideration in the Committee of the Whole House of the T-Bill, Senate Bill number 36, 2018, that is if we do not commence or do not conclude it today, and the Gaming Bill, National Assembly Bill number 38 of 2019. We'll also be looking at consideration in second reading of the Refugees Bill, the National Assembly Bill number 62 of 2019, again, if we do not conclude on it today. The Preservation of Human Dignity and Enforcement of Economic and Social Rights Bill, which is the Senate Bill number 27 of 2018, and the County Law Compliance and Enforcement Bill, which is the Senate Bill number 25 of 2018. Consideration of the County Allocation of Revenue Bill 2020 and third generation allocation formula for counties. Mr. Speaker, the two instruments are before the Senate, and should these instruments be received next week, they may be referred to the Budget and Appropriations Committee for consideration, and thereafter, the House may be recalled for a special sitting to consider them. On the other hand, should the recess be reached before the two documents are submitted to the National Assembly, they shall be referred to the relevant committee for consideration pursuant to, that is if they are reached today, pursuant to the procedural motion that was passed on June 30th. You may also recall that the House Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning is currently considering the nominee submitted by His Excellency the President for approval as the Auditor General. And further aware that the House, by resolution passed on 30th of June, extended the time for consideration of the nominee by a further period of 14 days from 8th of July 2020. It therefore means that the extended timeline will lapse on July 21st, when we will still be on recess. And in this regard, we anticipate that the House will be recalled for a special sitting to consider the nominee. Honorable Speaker, the House Business Committee will reconvene on 30th of July 2020 to consider business for the week beginning August the 4th, 2020. Honorable Speaker, I wish to lay this statement on the table of the House.
Honorable John Bandy, you have an intervention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under that same standing order 44, 2B, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the leader of the majority party or the leader of the minority party, as the case may be, or their designees, may make a statement relating to their responsibilities in the House or the activities of a committee. Mr. Speaker, it's on that basis that I sought for a statement on the issue of the 3 billion expenditure under Health Ministry. So this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, I want to direct a concern to the Ministry, the Departmental Committee for Education, Research and Technology. Mr. Speaker, there is 6.6 billion that this House allocated under Supplementary Budget 2, which was meant for payment of salaries to university staff. And Mr. Speaker, it was very specific to university staff. Mr. Speaker, up to now, the information I have is that that money has not been released to various universities. And therefore, I want to call upon the chair, the Departmental Committee on Education, as a way of oversight for this House to follow up this matter, invite the relevant Cabinet Secretary or the accounting officer to explain why the universities have not received this money to make payment to the university staff who are promised this money through, there was a collective bargain agreement. Finally, Mr. Speaker, or second to that, Mr. Speaker, there is also a concern, which I also want to ask the committee to deal with, that same committee, and the concern is regarding the release of free primary and free secondary education funds. Because most schools, Mr. Speaker, the operations and payment of salaries to the teachers who are employed by BOM and other staff, those Kenyans are not receiving anything now, And with this, the difficulty that we are facing as a result of COVID-19, Mr. Speaker, it is very difficult for these Kenyans. So, Mr. Speaker, could the committee deal with this matter and report back to the House as a way of oversighting funds that have already been voted for by this House? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Absolutely. The Committee on Education is accordingly directed to delve into the matter and report to the House when the House reconvenes. Next order.
Order number 8, motion. The Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Regulations 2020. Question to be put.
Honourable members, debate on this motion was concluded on Tuesday. What remained was for the question to be put, which I hereby do, that this House adopts the report to the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Regulations 2020, legal notice number 69 of 2020, laid to the table of the House on Thursday, June 25th, 2020, pursuant to provisions of Section 180 of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act of 2015, approves the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Regulations of 2020. Will as many as that opinion say aye? As many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the Care and Protection of Older Persons of Society Bill, Senate Bill number 17 of 2018, mover to reply, second reading, mover to reply and question to be put.
Mover. What's the mover of this bill? The chair of Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare? Or any member of the committee who can reply? I can say the Honorable David Olesankok is ready to reply.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I beg to reply.
I put the question, which is that the care and protection of the older members of society bill, Senate Bill number 17 of 2018, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next.
A bill for an act of Parliament to give effect to Article 57 of the Constitution to provide a framework for the care of older members of society, to establish a framework for the empowerment and protection of the elderly and the maintenance of their well-being, safety and security, and for connected purposes.
Next.
Order number 10, motion. Appointment of a member to the House Business Committee.
The chairperson, Committee on Selection, Leader Majority.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Orders, Order number 171-2, and further to the resolution of the House on February 13, 2020, this House approves the appointment of the Honorable Mohammed Abdikaim Osman MP to the House Business Committee in addition to those specified under paragraphs A, B, C, D, E, and F. Mr. Speaker, the House will recall that the Honorable Eden Duale used to sit in the House Business Committee as the leader of government business, and I was also a member of the House Business Committee. And now with the changes that took place, we find that we have a vacancy, which the House Business Committee did approve, that we appoint the Honorable Mohammed Osman to come into the Business Committee and at least fill that vacancy that is there. This is one of the powers reserved for the House Business Committee. It doesn't go through the selection, and we would really wish to ask the membership to approve so that the House Business Committee is fully constituted. I really don't want to belabor that. I would like to propose to move and ask the Honorable Body to second.
Honorable Leader of Minority.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Leader of Majority has said it all. We had, when Duale was the Leader of Majority, Honorable Kimunya was also a member of the House Business Committee. But now, by virtue of him being Leader of Majority, he automatically becomes a member, but his position is vacant. Because again, I think it would not be tidy to keep Honorable Duale in that committee. I think it just makes sense that we replace Duale from that committee with someone else. And I think that is what we are proposing, and I second.
Well, members, I propose the question, which is that pursuant to provision of standing under 171, subsection 2, and further to the resolution of this House on February 13th, 2020, this House now approves the appointment of the Honorable Mohammed Abdukaim Osman MP to the House Business Committee in addition to those specified under paragraphs A, B, C, D, E, and F. Right? We of the House that I put the question. That pursuant to the provisions of standing under 171, subsection 2, and further to the resolution of this House on February 13, 2020, this House now approves the appointment of the Honorable Mohammed Abdukaim Osman MP to the House Business Committee in addition to those specified under paragraphs A, B, C, D, E, and F. With as many as one opinion say aye. Aye. As many as a contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 11, appointment of a member to the Committee of Parliamentary Powers and Privileges.
Honorable Kimunya.
Honorable Speaker, this appointment under this order is tied to appointments in the next order. In that there's already an existing member in the powers and privileges. And because, Honorable Speaker, I intend to request that we step down order number 12 for further consultations because much as we are ready within the Jubilee Coalition, I gather I've got feelers that perhaps there is some consultation that are still to be held within the minority. So, and to be able to carry the full list for the entire House, it's important that we give room for that negotiation and people to consult and be comfortable. And also it gives us an opportunity, even from our own side, to reconsider where people may feel that they are still in one committee or they probably have not been fully considered. So, because I'll be asking for a stepping down of order number 12, could I also ask that we step down order number 11, and then what we'll do, we will take some time between now and next week, and when we are ready, when we perhaps reconvening to approve the Auditor General or some other point, I'll then write to you to give us a specific date when we can come and approve this list. Mr. Speaker, I wish to submit.
Very well. Looks like there is broad support. Apparently there is bipartisan approval. Let me hear the Honorable John Bandy.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very excited, Mr. Speaker. Because, Mr. Speaker, I had some issues which we need to resolve with my colleague from the other side, the Leader of Majority. And I'm happy that the Leader of Majority has seen his fist for us to consult. This is the spirit of the handshake, the spirit of negotiation, consultation, and agreeing on the way forward. I want to thank the Leader of Majority, and that is in concurrence with the minority side. I support the withdrawal.
So in that case, when the Leader of Majority said he intends to apply for stepping down of the next order, but in the meantime, for the reasons stated, I agree to the request and order that the business appearing as order number 11 be stood down. So we move to the next order.
Order number 12, motion. Appointment of members to various committees.
Chair of Selection Committee, the Honorable Kimunya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And now I would formally request that we step down order number 12 for the reasons I advanced earlier.
I think this does not require. It appears like everybody is desirous so that happens, and therefore you see, this is the problem of you have not read the standing orders. It was a request. There is no question to be put. The request was not made to the House. It was made to the Speaker. So I agree to the request for the reasons that have been already explained. Stand down the business and allow for further and other consultations. Maybe the Honorable Kaki Nyamai who said further, other, and better. And mother. Now what is that? Please do the consultations. I'm always available to do the needful. I had received an indication that the member for Tigania West, before we go to the next order, intended to make some representation to the House. Before we go to the next order number 13, which is Committee of the Whole House.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I stand on behalf of the Vice Chair of the Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries Committee. Because of what you said about the committee. It doesn't have the chair, and the vice chair is our whip. Honorable Speaker, he asked me to stand before the House and move the amendments. But Honorable Speaker, upon consultations, I stand to request that we defer or we stand down the business as listed in order number 13 for various reasons. I would like to cite the following reasons as the reasons why.
Is it the entire order number 13? I thought there's a specific one.
No, it is specifically the 13.2, which is the team bill, the Senate bill number 36 of 2018, which was supposed to go to the Committee of the Whole House this afternoon. Honorable Speaker, this bill has elicited a lot of interest. Tea is a very important sector in the country, and also it has a lot of interest. We have had interest from within and from without, and I want to thank the members, very many of them who have already submitted their amendments, which were supposed to be considered today. Honorable Speaker, we have looked through the amendments proposed by the members and the amendments proposed by the committee, and we have realized that there is a lot of interfacing, and therefore we are requesting that we be given some time to do some winnowing so that we can present to the House amendments that do not necessarily cause a lot of repetition and which will create the due clarity so that when we go for mediation, which we are sure we will, then we will be able to have a very clear document that can be useful for the negotiation. Honorable Speaker, I submit.
I think the Honorable Dr. Mutunga has given very valid reasons, and because the committee doesn't have a chairperson, the vice chair, who is the majority whip, is indisposed, not in the House. I think it's only fair that we allow also. I've also looked through these various proposed amendments, and I would encourage the various members who have proposed amendments to also have a chance to sit with the committee, see whether you can be able to bridge the gap so that what comes to the House is not so many of those amendments. Where there is ability to concur. If you are unable to agree, then I think your amendments will still be considered by the committee of the whole House. But for the reasons stated, I therefore order that business appearing as under number 13, Roman 2, being the T-Bill, Senate Bill number 36 of 2018, be stood down. Move to the next order.
Order number 13, Committee of the Whole House.
Order members, we are now going to the Committee of the Whole House to consider the President's reservation to the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2020.
The President's recommendations to Clause 2.
Order, honorable members, I propose a question that the President's recommendation to Clause 2 be considered. And I thought I should be calling the leader of majority party. Okay, so you are the one taking, and you are seated in an extremely difficult position to manage. So proceed, Honorable Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the proposed Section 2A be deleted and be substituted, therefore, with the following new Section 2A as recommended by the President Memoranda. Section 2A, that notwithstanding the provisions of Section 1, the Parliamentary Service Commission may, with the approval of the National Assembly, establish the following public funds: Parliamentary Mortgage Members Scheme Fund. B, Parliamentary Mortgage Staff Scheme Fund. C, Parliamentary Car Loan Members Scheme Fund. D, Parliamentary Car Loan Staff Scheme Fund. And E, Parliamentary Catering for purposes of Parliament or a House of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the recommendations of the President have been wholly accommodated, and the members of our committee sat and came up with a report recommending the adoption of the President's reservations as such. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. So I propose a question which is at clause 2 be amended as recommended by His Excellency, the President. Any member would want to speak to it? Well, we could give 2 members, honestly, honorable members. Let's have, I think Honorable Sankok surely has something to say.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And the import of this one is very clear, that we may end up, if it is not well structured, we may end up having duplication of funds that are available in the national or county government. Funds like Uwezo Fund, Youth Fund, and so on. But when it is specific that only funds that are supposed to be used by within the House of Parliament, then the President reservation we really do support. Is a very good advice that the President have given to this House, and we take it wholeheartedly and we do support it.
Okay, let's hear from the Parliamentary Service Commission, Honorable Namsi Shaban.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity to also say something about the President's memorandum. The mortgage for members, mortgage and car loan for members and also for the staff of Parliamentary Service Commission has been running as a revolving fund. And even then, it was through some regulations, and the way it was running, we felt there's something more that we need to do so that it can be a fund that can be relied on. Despite all the difficulties that were there in terms of running it, I must also commend that our administrator, who is the clerk of the National Assembly, has done a fantastic job. But now we are very, very happy that His Excellency the President has actually recognized it and felt it should be part of our Public Finance Management Act.
Okay. Maybe lastly, the Honorable Dr. Nyikal. It's nothing medical, by the way. Proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. As I stand to support this, Mr. Speaker, I just would like the Parliamentary Service Commission to be extremely careful when they are implementing the car loan. I hope it will not meant to replace the funds that people have been getting for cars, because that then would disadvantage members of Parliament, because compared to other state officers of their level who actually have cars for the which they use on a daily basis, which are given by the government, if this is removed, then you will be having your cars which you are servicing on your own. So I think that is the only thing the Service Commission should look at when they are implementing. Otherwise, I support.
Okay. So, honorable members, I put the question, which is at clause 2, be amended as recommended by His Excellency the President. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. And that marks the end, and therefore I call the mover to move reporting of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Honorable Chair. I beg to move that the committee do report to the House its consideration of the President's recommendation to the Public Finance Management Act, Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2020, and its approval thereof without amendments. And I request the leader of majority.
You will not request anybody.
Thank you, Mr.
I will do that on your behalf if there is need be for now. But what I'll proceed to do is to put the question, And I proceed to put the question, which is that the committee do report to the House its recommendation, its consideration of the President's recommendation to the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2020, and its approval thereof without amendments. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Chair.
Oh,
You
yes,
have it.
I have it now. I thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the President's recommendation to the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2020, and its approval thereof without amendments.
Mover.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. I also request Honorable Kimunya, Leader of Majority, to second the motion for agreement with the report of the Committee of the Whole House. Honorable Kimunya.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second and really to thank both the committee and His Excellency the President for facilitating the creation of these funds within Parliament so that we can, at least the membership of Parliament, can benefit from the utilization of these funds in a way that can now be fast-tracked and without having to, every time there's an issue, have to refer it to the Treasury. So there's a lot of self-regulation that will be inbuilt into this for the better management of the fund to facilitate of members. So Madam Speaker, I beg to second.
Order, members. I go on to propose a question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. Should I proceed to put the question, members? Okay, I go on to put the question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Do you move to the next order? Let's now move to the next order.
Order number 14, the Refugee Bill, National Assembly Bill number 62 of 2019, second reading.
The Leader of Majority.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the Refugees Bill 2019 be now read a second time. Madam Speaker, the principal object of this bill is really to provide for mechanisms for the recognition, the protection, and management of refugees, which will then give effect to the 1951 United Nations Convention that relates to the status of refugees, together with the 1967 protocol that relates to the status of refugees, and the 1969 OAU convention, OAU as it was known then, the Organization of African Unity, I believe now is African Union, convention governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa. And Madam Speaker, you know, every Kenyan who lives in Kenya knows that we are one of the biggest hosts of refugees from within the region. So this bill comes in at a critical time when we really have to look at how do we recognize refugees, how do we protect them, how do we manage them, so that even as they come within our borders from the neighborhood, there's a proper legal framework that puts into effect all these other protocols and conventions that have been passed and which, as per our Constitution, we have already domesticated. Honorable Speaker, clause 3 of the bill basically provides the definition of a refugee. And the details of that are contained within the bill, so I really don't want to have to go through all that. But we are talking about a refugee in Kenya, and who is obviously because they're fearing persecution, either because of culture, because of religion, because of their political beliefs, and they have left their country of birth or country of origin, migrated into Kenya, and hence then been, and we need to then figure out how do we then know that, or say A is a refugee and B is not a refugee. And the bill then basically puts that into context and defines who a refugee is, which is the person who has been compelled to leave his or her place of habitual residence in order to seek refuge in another place outside his or her country of origin or nationality due to all those other conditions and stable public order within their country of origin. And it also gives an opportunity for the cabinet secretary in charge, on the recommendation of a Refugee Advisory Council, to also designate a person as a refugee. Madam Speaker, the bill establishes some administrative units under Part 2, basically the Department of Refugee Services. It also does the Refugee Advisory Committee and the Refugee Status Appeals Committee, which organs will then work together in terms of the determination and the management of refugees. Particularly Clause 7, Madam Speaker, establishes the Department of Refugee Services. Clause 9 establishes the Refugee Advisory Committee. Clause 11 establishes the Refugee Status Appeals Committee. And basically this committee will be the successor to the Appeals Board that was established under the Refugees Act of 2006, and whose main function shall be to hear and determine the appeals. Honorable Speaker, this bill contains elaborate provisions that relate to the regulation of the application for refugee status, and these are captured within Part 3 for members who've looked at and will be getting a bigger report, and who has also looked at the committee report. Further, Clause 13, Madam Speaker, establishes the Refugee Status Eligibility Panel, whose function shall be to review recommendations made on refugee status determination. Allow me to give a brief summary of the contents of the bill. Basically, Part 1, as usual, contains the preliminary provisions, title, the short title, commencement, interpretation, and definitions. And also in terms of who can be included, who can be excluded from refugee status, and when do you cease to be a refugee. Part 2, Honorable Speaker, contains the provisions mainly on administrative matters. Part 3, provisions on application for refugee status. Part 4, provisions on reception for refugees and how they are treated in terms of refugees and asylum seekers. And basically from the time they enter Kenya, how they are designated, what's the duties of the refugee reception officers, the security screening, all that is now captured within Part 4. Madam Speaker, within Part 5, we're looking at the rights and duties of the refugees and the asylum seekers within Kenya. And Part 6 then looks at the control of the designated areas. And I think here is where we members need to just look through, because the provision, it's, for example, our Kakuma areas becomes a designated area. Then what are the requirements to reside within a designated area? How do you control a designated area? How do you restrict persons within that area? And it also provides, at this point, the interlink between the county government and the national government, because obviously these people will be within counties. And that's all covered within Part 6. Then Part 7 talks of or covers the whole issue of the integration, the repatriation, and resettlement of refugees, because they will not be refugees forever, and at some point they will need to be reintegrated back into their communities or reintegrated within the host communities, and the modalities of that. and particularly the consideration of refugees in terms of matters development, affirmative action for women, children, and persons with disability, voluntary repatriations, and resettlement of the refugees within Kenya. And the next provisions, miscellaneous, are contained within Part 8. Again, that will cover the issues of the register for refugees, asylum seekers, offenses and penalties, and the repeal of the Refugees Act Cap 173. That is as well as the transitional provisions moving from the existing law to the new law when passed by this Parliament. And obviously, Part 10 then contains provisions on delegated legislation and empowers the Cabinet Secretary to make provisions generally for giving effect to this Act and for prescribing anything that is not covered. So, Madam Speaker, I believe this is timely. Like I said, Kenya is host to several people from our destabilized neighborhood. I'm not sure we have many Kenyans out there, or any Kenyans out there, claiming to be refugees. We've always been, the haven of peace. And we would hope that we will be, through this bill, and the proper management will be setting the standard for the rest of the world in terms of how you host people who have been destabilized in their countries. So they feel that because there are problems in their countries of origin, and they seek safe haven in other countries, they are not treated as lesser human beings than they were or they would like to be. And I believe that's the spirit of this, and I want to really thank the committee because I know they've done extensive work, and they will take us in detail, and then the members would be free to ventilate and enrich this bill so that by the time we come to committee, we can have a model bill for the rest of the world. With those remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to move, and I'll ask the Honorable Paul Konange, who is the chair of the parliamentary committee that is charged with this on security and administration, to second.
Honorable Koinange.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion on the following grounds. Madam Speaker, the Refugee Bill 2019, National Assembly Bill number 62, was read for the first time on 10th September 2019 and committed to the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security for consideration and report to the House pursuant to Standing Order 216, bracket 5, in bracket C. Madam Speaker, consequently, in accordance to Article 118 of the Constitution and Standing Order 127 in bracket 3, the committee sought views from the public by way of written memoranda and further conducted public hearing in the following counties: Nairobi, Mombasa, Nakuru, Uasin Gishu, Garissa, and Turkana. Organizations and institutions that made representation to the committee on the bill include the following: County Government of Garissa, refugee leaders in Nakuru County, refugees living in Dadaab, Refugee Consortium of Kenya, Danish Refugee Council of Kenya, Kituo cha Sheria, United Nations Commission for Refugees, Amnesty International, and International Rescue Committee. Madam Speaker, other individuals who submitted their proposals to the committee include Francis Joroge and Alan Murioki of Strathmore Law School, and Ekai Nabenyo, a lawyer, and representatives of host communities in Turkana. Madam Speaker, the committee noted various comments in support of or against provisions in the bill and recommends amendments to the bill as provided in the report. Madam Speaker, permit me to highlight important provisions in the bill that deal with the issue of refugees and their protection, first and foremost by dint of Articles 22 in bracket 5 and Article 2 in bracket 6 of the Constitution. All international conventions that have been ratified by Kenya now form part of Kenya law. These include the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Refugee Convention, and the Protocol relating to the status of refugee, the OAU Convention governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa, and the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights. The treaties play a complementary role in ensuring the protection of refugees. Madam Speaker, the bill provides for the institutional and legal framework for the recognition, protection, and management of refugees. The bill establishes various offices and institutions, which include the Department of Refugee Services, the Commissioner for Refugee Affairs, Refugee Advisory Committee, Refugee Status Appeals Committee, and the Refugee Status Eligibility Panel. These institutions are tasked with the coordination of activities and programs relating to refugees, provision of adequate facilities and services for the protection, reception, and care of asylum seekers and refugees within Kenya, among others. Madam Speaker, the bill is underpinned by a number of fundamental principles, mostly, notably, one, non-discrimination where provisions of all bill are to be applied without a discrimination as to race, religion, or region of country, age, among others. The principles of non-refoulement, which provide that no one shall expel or return a refugee against his or her will to a territory where he or she fears threats to life or freedom. And finally, refugee self-reliance, as provided for in clause 28 in bracket 4 of the bill. It states that refugees shall be enabled to contribute to the economic and social development of Kenya. This has been further enhanced in providing required documentation at both levels of government. Madam Speaker, the committee proposed amendments to the bill for consideration in committee of the whole House, most notably, 1, clause 28 of the bill, in which the committee proposes to insert new clauses that relate to the right of the refugee to work that will enable a refugee to contribute to the Kenya economy. Right of
Chair,
documentation.
I hope you're winding up, Chair.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Was that a mistake? 5 more minutes. You have 5 more minutes, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Right of documentation, right of freedom of movement, all these rights are subject to the laws applicable in Kenya. And secondly, Madam Speaker, inclusion of vulnerable persons, who include persons who have suffered trauma and persons of old age, as special groups that need special attention and protection afforded by authorities who undertake refuge processing activities. And finally, Madam Speaker, a new clause 39, which provides for confidentiality in handling refugee information. This is in line with Article 31 of the Constitution, which provides for the right to privacy and data protection. It is therefore my considered view that the enactment of this bill with the proposed amendments will enhance the realization of refugee rights in Kenya, and I invite members to read the report of the committee. Madam Speaker, I really truthfully want to thank my members of the committee. They took time to visit the refugee camps and to come up with the new amendments which are there. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I second.
Honorable members, I go on to propose a question, which is that the Refugees Bill, National Assembly Bill number 62 of 2019, be now read a second time. Let's start with the member for Mwea, Honorable Washira Kabinga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this bill. Madam Speaker, on the onset, I want to say I'm a member of the Committee on Administration and National Security, and we did visit most of our refugee camps, Madam Speaker, for us to come up with this particular proposal. Madam Speaker, the efforts to repeal Cap 173 that governs our refugees in our country started way back in the 11th Parliament. A lot of work was done. We relied on that effort to now improve on what we're having. Madam Speaker, as we are all aware, Kenya is the epicenter of peace in Eastern Africa. And what that means, Madam Speaker, is that we are also a host of a number of refugees in this region, Madam Speaker. And it is therefore very important that this country adopts the best of the bills to govern the affairs of refugees in this country. We want to live as an example. We want to ensure that even as we host refugees in this country, they become a resource to us and not a problem to this country, Madam Speaker. And one of the things that's being proposed by this bill is on the integration of refugees into the host communities, Madam Speaker, so that we do not only look at refugees as people who are living in secluded areas, but as people who can also contribute eminently to the economy of this country, Madam Speaker. It is therefore important that we come up with a bill that enables them to participate in the development agenda of our country. And also, Madam Speaker, we are also aware that even as we host them, some of the countries, neighboring countries where they come from, are also stabilizing, and for that reason, we also need to come up with a smooth way of enabling voluntary repatriation of these refugees, Madam Speaker. It is also important that we come up with a system, an online system, that will be able to track down the movements of these refugees, even as we allow integration into the communities, Madam Speaker. We did notice when we visited some of these areas that there are some of the refugees who are holding ID cards as Kenyan citizens, as well as refugee cards, Madam Speaker. And this is something that will be sorted out once we streamline our systems and ensure that the records are well kept, Madam Speaker. We are also looking at establishment of relevant institutions that will help in the management of the refugee affairs, Madam Speaker, so that we can learn from the past experiences and ensure that the management is streamlined, Madam Speaker. We also want to address some of the conflictual areas that have been in existence between the refugees and the communities, Madam Speaker. For the information of this House, it's important to note that in some of the instances, the refugees have been perceived or seen to be living in a better way than the communities, and hence causing some conflict between those communities. It is therefore important that even as we look at the welfare of the refugees, we also look at the communities to ensure that those conflictual areas are eliminated. We have a number of bodies that are being formed, including the appeals board, so that no longer one person makes a decision on the status of refugees, Madam Speaker, and also continually or have a continuous review of the processes that govern the refugees in this country through a committee. This bill proposes a committee to continually review the processes, the policies that govern the refugees in this country. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I rise to support, and I'm sure we're now coming up with a bill that will be among the best in this region to govern.
Well said, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, please take note that you have 5 minutes so that you can put your thoughts in order. Let's have the Honorable Oundo Jambo, member for Funyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I also stand to support the Refugee Bill, National Bill of 2019, before us today. Honorable Speaker, Kenya has always been a safety haven, hosting members or families running away from chaos in the neighboring countries, especially Somalia, this DRC, Congo, and the rest. Honorable Speaker, probably this ability or our ability to host these refugees that has allowed us to receive international recognition. Honorable Speaker, refugees come with both benefits and problems, but probably it's more or less to focus on the benefits, on the good tidings of refugees, instead of focusing on the problems, because actually they're running away from problems, so initially they'll become a problem. But I have to agree with my colleague who has just contributed. There has been a continued feeling that refugees at times are treated far much better than the local communities, and hence probably this bill, after being refined, should try as much as possible address those challenges and those fears so that refugees are not seen as a nuisance, but as part and parcel of the problems as members of the national community we must bear for the purposes of offering humanity. Honorable Speaker, the bill is gender administrative in nature, providing administrative organs or institutions to manage refugee affairs, dealing on the process of handling application to all the way to integration of a refugee. Honorable Speaker, however, there are a few issues that require us to be addressed. First of all, from where I sit, the first one is clause 20, dealing with women and children. Honorable Speaker, I would have expected, and I hope the committee will take this note, or will have to deal with the committee of the whole House, on the issue of protection of children. Children who are refugees and who reside in Kenya should be subjected to the same requirements as Kenyan children under the Children's Act, because they are here not by choice, but circumstances beyond their control. They are no longer having their youths, their years are running by, so unless they are given the same protection like Kenyans and the Children's Act, in the event they are ever integrated in the society, there will be a great mismatch between Kenyan children and these refugee children. Because once we accept refugees to come, we must accept that we are going to live with them for many years to come. Honorable Speaker, Part 7 of the bill talks about integration, repatriation, and resettlement of refugees. Honorable Speaker, in this country we have many refugees who have one way or another integrated in a society, but they have never been considered as useful members of this society. Probably at the time when we are going to Committee of the Whole House, we need to address that issue. What happens to refugee women who get married to Kenyan men and comply with the requirements of the relevant laws in terms of migration, and they are denied papers to justify their citizenship, for example, ID and the rest? What happens to these children who come here when they are toddlers, go through the education system, continue to offer services to this country, yet there is no provision on how they can be integrated in society? So those are some of the areas that we need to refine so that whatever bill we come up with is a bill that allows integration. Because places like US have grown, have developed because of immigrants, and have been very good at adopting immigrants. For us, we might also have to follow the same way so that we accommodate these refugees. With those few remarks, I support.
Honorable David Sankok.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I do support this bill, Honorable Speaker, because it is an idea whose time have come. And who am I to resist, Honorable Speaker? Honorable Speaker, Kenya has been a haven of peace in a continent that is marred by civil war, guerrilla war, and even coup d'etats. Honorable Speaker, so many people, when they have problems in their country, they will really want to come to a haven of peace like Kenya. Honorable Speaker, if you can remember, we have had 4 heads of states, all of them democratically elected, and 2 of them retired voluntarily and went home and handed over the baton of leadership. That is why we are admired from wide and far, Honorable Speaker, as a haven of peace. Honorable Speaker, and I want to congratulate the committee because they did extensive public participation. They interrogated communities that host refugees. They also interrogated organizations that are for the refugees, Honorable Speaker, and of the refugees. Honorable Speaker, they also brought on board the international instruments which Kenya ratified. Hence, they are part of our laws, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is high time, and that's why I support this bill. It's high time for us to rethink the whole issue of refugees, Honorable Speaker, because we can use them as human resource. If a lion can adapt a baby oryx, which is naturally food for it, why don't we as a country adapt these refugees and use them as a human resource, Honorable Speaker, as my colleague have alluded, that America is built because of immigrants, Honorable Speaker. We can adapt these refugees as immigrants, Honorable Speaker, and use them to steer our economy to greater heights, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, most of them are qualified. Most of them are doctors, engineers, researchers, Honorable Speaker, teachers, Honorable Speaker. We can tap on that human resource, Honorable Speaker, because one single human brain channeled to proper use is more worth than all the gold mines in Ghana, is more worth than all the oil wells in Libya, Honorable Speaker. So if we can tap on this human resource, especially the human brain that the refugees come with it, Honorable Speaker, then we can be able to use them as a human resource, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it beats logics to seclude them and to kind of confine them. They are running from their countries because of threats to their lives, Honorable Speaker. And then we come and imprison them, confine them. Honorable Speaker, I think it is high time that we rethink about this issue of refugees, and this bill is addressing most of it, so that we can adapt them and use them to steer our economy, Honorable Speaker, because most of them are very qualified, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, children who are born to these refugees, Honorable Speaker, which crime do they have? Honorable Speaker, we have our own kids in our own background and backyards, Honorable Speaker, and we give them registration. And you know, Honorable Speaker, our constitution is very clear. Any child that is born within the borders of Kenya is qualified to be a Kenyan citizen. We should, Honorable Speaker, be able to give these children an opportunity to be part of us, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, and human resource is not easy to come by. Some of these refugees have taken them years of schooling, years in education, 8 years in primary, 4 years in secondary, and several years in colleges and universities, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, ours is just to adapt them and to use that human resource to steer our economy. So, Honorable Speaker, I do support this bill 100%, and it should be fast-tracked so that we can start implementing it as soon as possible. So I request the committee, that is Honorable Koinange, to really fast-track it. We need it like yesterday. We need it to be implemented immediately. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Oduol Adhiambo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for opportunity to speak on this bill, the Refugees Bill, National Assembly Bill of number 62 of 2020. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I'd like to congratulate and thank the committee for putting and bringing a very clear exposition of a very important bill. Honorable Speaker, I support this bill specifically because the bill seeks indeed to help us as a country, both at the national and at the county government, to recognize, which is something we really need to do, those who come seeking asylum, to protect them, and also to protect the host communities, and, Honorable Speaker, to ensure that there can be clear management, and in particular that we can maintain, Honorable Speaker, the rule of law, order, and really then be sure that we do not create problems as we seek to solve them. I, therefore, Honorable Speaker, looking in particular at the issue of coexistence and the manner in which Part 4, integration and repatriation and resettlement, seeks specifically to look at how there will be shared use of social amenities, but also ensures that there will not only be designated areas, but an attempt to provide a way of ensuring that these refugees not only feel at home, but also understand that they need to respect those that they found in the country, Madam Speaker. And I, therefore, would want, as I support this bill, to also take note, Honorable Speaker, that the bill takes into account the special attention that we give to vulnerable parts or members, the children and the women, and also seeks to ensure that attention will be given whenever there will be any assistance that is required. As I close, Honorable Speaker, I just want to say that this, for me, is a very important concern, because with the COVID-19, for example, right now, Honorable Speaker, we have had cases not in Kenya, but in areas across the border, where as we seek to alleviate suffering of women and children, at times, if we don't have proper law and proper regulation, then those vulnerable groups like women and children have suffered. It is for this reason, Honorable Speaker, that I support the refugee bill, and I would want indeed to see that what we provide as a framework with the bill to allow not only peaceful coexistence, integration, and the protection and particular attention given as is required of different groups, and most importantly, that host communities would also be respected. I support the bill, Honorable Speaker, and I thank you for opportunity.
Honorable Namsi.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipatia nafasi hii pia mimi kuunga mkono mswada huu ambao utaleta sheria ya kusimamia wakimbizi wa nje. Mheshimiwa Spika, Kenya ikiwa mmoja wa Umoja wa Mataifa na wakiwa wameweka sahihi kwenye mikataba ya kusimamia masuala ya wakimbizi wa nje, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati umewadia kuwa hata sisi pia lazima tuweke sheria ambazo zinafatana na mujibu wa mikataba ambayo imetolewa na Umoja wa Mataifa. Mheshimiwa Spika, si siri kwamba Kenya inalinda maslahi na imepeana tuseme makao kwa wakimbizi wa kutoka maeneo ya nchi jirani, haswa wale ambao wamekuwa na matatizo nyumbani kwao kule walikotoka na wakahamia huku kwetu, na walivyohamia hapa kwetu, Umoja wa Mataifa imekuwa ikishikana na serikali yetu ili kuhakikisha kuwa wakimbizi hawa wanaweza kuishi kwenye maeneo yale bila hali ya wasiwasi. Lakini ni vizuri Mheshimiwa Spika kuwa sheria hii ikishapitishwa ni kuwa itaweza kuwalinda wakimbizi hawa, lakini juu ya hapo pia wale ambao wamewapokea kwenye maeneo yao wanaweza kuishi vizuri wakiishi na wao kama majirani na kujua baada ya miaka hii yote hawa wamekuwa pia ndugu zetu. Vile vile Mheshimiwa Spika, ni vizuri kufahamu ya kwamba kule ambako wakimbizi hawa wamekimbilia maeneo ya Kenya ni maeneo ambayo yana ukame, ugumu, na hata wale ambao wanaishi kama majirani ambao ndio wamewapokea maeneo yao pia wanahitaji na wanastahili pia kutambuliwa na Umoja wa Mataifa. Mheshimiwa Spika, yangu ni kuunga mkono na kushukuru kwa serikali yetu kwa miaka hii yote imekuwa ikiwalinda wakimbizi wa nje, na vile vile tunajua kuwa watoto ambao wamezaliwa hapa nchini Kenya wanatakikana kuwa na haki kama watoto wetu wa hapa nchini, kwa sababu wakimbizi wengine wamekaa hapa miaka mingi, miaka zaidi ya 20, miaka zaidi ya 30, na wamejua kuwa hapa kwetu nchini Kenya ni kama kwao nyumbani. Mheshimiwa Spika, naunga mkono.
For 1 minute, I was confused as to whether refugee in Swahili is wakimbiaji ama wakimbizi. Wakimbizi. But I think it's wakimbizi. I'm educated. The Honorable Millie Odhiambo Mabona.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Madam Speaker, I do support the bill, except I was hoping that the committee would have given us reasons why they are bringing a new bill after the old one. I don't know what mischief you are trying to redress, because I've looked at the new one, and there are really minor differences which could have really been through amendment. I'm happy that they have the non-refoulement provision. Even though the chair of the committee has spoken about the issue of non-discrimination as a principle, it is missing in the bill, so I'm hoping that they can provide for that. Madam Speaker, because of time, I will not get back to the background that members have said. I just want to raise some issues that I've noticed of concern, especially because we don't have that much time. Number one, in terms of definition, Madam Speaker, I would like to request the committee to expand the definition of shelter or essential services to include shelter as essential services, and also reproductive rights as an essential service. We have seen through COVID-19 that when you have responses that are health-related and you don't specify reproductive health, that women who are pregnant suffer. I am happy that the word spouse includes common law spouse, especially under the refugee circumstances. That is very likely to happen, that people will meet and marry. I'm also happy that they're including children born out of wedlock. I would encourage the committee to use the recognized international language. A treaty is not done, it is adopted. I would want to also encourage that there is a growing international adoption of other grounds for recognition of refugee status, including torture, cruel, inhuman, and or degrading punishment or treatment, including cases of FGM that are considered like that, honor killings, and maybe that in cases where a person can actually prove that they are running away from such instances, and that should be included. Madam Speaker, I think also if you look at clause 4D, a person should not be denied refugee status just because he or she has sought asylum in another country. It should be that he or she has been granted asylum in another country. Madam Speaker, I'm not very happy with the advisory committee as constituted, because it's very government heavy, and when you have government heavy, it's very difficult to ensure gender representation. So I would want to suggest that, like the old law, that we provide representation of civil society. And Madam Speaker, there is a clause that I always have a problem with, and I've seen in the T bill that I proposed an amendment, and I was told that is money bill. I don't think it is. That the committee should hire experts, not co-opt people. This is poor governance practice. You cannot find a system through which people are hired, and then you go and co-opt. Madam Speaker, the other issue for me, I think the composition of appeals board is good, but I would want to urge that we include the Gender Commission, and also to just enhance a little bit more of the role of the UNHCR. Madam Speaker, I think under clause 19, I would also want to suggest that the breaches on non-refoulement principle should also include issues of that I've spoken about, including sexual and gender-based violence or forced pregnancies, because we know there are countries where there have been such cases. Madam Speaker, there is also too much discretion under Article 19, clause 19, and we know that this too much discretion is usually the mother of dictatorship and impunity, so maybe we need to limit that. Madam Speaker, the 60 days that is provided under clause 22 is too short. I like the special attention to persons with disability, women and children, but I think the old law had a stronger provision which we need to strengthen. And under clause 28, we need to strengthen both rights and duties under the UN Conventions of 1951 and its protocol and the AU Convention, so we need to actually provide specifically. And Madam Speaker, also Article 4 on religious rights, and I'd indicated before that we need to include the issue of non-discrimination, which I don't see in the bill. I think in terms of time, I've really tried because we don't have time. Otherwise, I'll try and push some through amendments I support.
Very specific contributions there. I believe the chair is following keenly. And that, Honorable Millie, you can follow through in the next stage of the bill. Let's have the Honorable Manje Wathigo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute also to this motion on creation of this bill, that is a refugee bill, and say it is timely. This is the time we should come up with a good management of refugee. I'll start by giving an example in my constituency in one of the wards where we have so many people from Congo. They have occupied a very big space because they normally go in one area, and they have started a church and also a football team. And when I try to check properties, most of them do not have proper papers of staying in the place. That's why I thought this is a very good bill coming at this particular time so that we can manage this group. And also, our country is sandwiched between these refugee-producing countries like Somalia and Southern Sudan, which are not stable. Therefore, we expect to have large numbers coming to our country. So if we don't organize ourselves, then they will occupy, and most likely they will take the resources that belongs to Kenya. So we cannot forget that when they come to the country, they also compete with the little resources that we have. For example, if they come and they occupy some areas, apart from where they are designated, like Dadaab and Kakuma, they come also to urban areas, and you find them doing manual jobs, like what Kenyans will do, and also doing this kind of small businesses like hawking and also hair cutting. So I think it should be managed and organized so that at least the Kenyans themselves do not feel this pinch from the outsiders, because each nationals have their own countries, and if they're not stable in their country, they should not also destabilize us. And that is why maybe internationally the governments try to stabilize other governments so that their people do not move for the meager resources that we have. And also when they occupy, when they come to Kenya, they come with their own culture, different cultures. So when they come to our country, they influence. In my places, you'll find people who do not practice relationships the way we do. So they tend to influence our children. Therefore, I think we should come up with a very good regulation on when they come to our places, and when they are integrated, they should be integrated in a good manner. Madam Speaker, we cannot also forget the kind of insecurity they bring to our country, like the terrorism that happened the other time. They hit our hotel, and when the government tried to check, it was organized in a refugee camp. So these are the issues that we should come up and do good amendments that will make this road a good road. I support the bill.
Dr. Makali?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, I want to first of all thank the Chair and the committee members for this important bill. The truth of the matter, Honorable Speaker, is that this bill has gone through very intensive public participation. Most of the key institutions working in this area have been consulted and they have given their input. The truth of the matter is it has not been easy to get this bill to where it is today because, as honorable members are saying, Honorable Speaker, there are lots of interests coming from different stakeholders. And one of the things which was quite difficult to get through this bill was the issue of balancing between human rights and what we call national interests. Because the refugees come to this country and there are laws which safeguard them in terms of their own human rights. But at the same time, Honorable Speaker, even though we have opened the gates for them, at the same time we must also safeguard what we call national interests. And those are things like what Honorable Manch is talking about, issues of national security and all that. But looking at the bill, Honorable Speaker, you realize that there are provisions to take care of most of these areas. For example, who would qualify to be a refugee? What vetting process would they go through before they are admitted? And all that is to ensure that their own human rights and also what I would call the validity or eligibility of these refugees is also factored into the whole process. The other issue, Honorable Speaker, is, and this has happened in this country, we have heard of situations where communities living next to the refugee camps claim to be living a life which is worse than what the refugees are going through. And actually, attempts have been made in this country where the local community wants to go in as refugees so that they can benefit from some of these benefits. And basically what that is saying is that there are some of them who, when they come to Kenya, will even live better than Kenyans. And I think the question we need to, as leaders and national leaders, we must make sure that even as we accommodate refugees, then they don't appear to be enjoying more than our own people, because to me that would be sending the wrong signal to Kenyans. The other issue, and the big question is, should we allow them to work? When you look at the bill, there's a provision for them to be allowed to work. And the human rights, people who push for human rights would really say it is important that they work, and working makes sense. But in a country like Kenya, where unemployment is so high, then what that means is they'll come and start competing for the fewer kind of opportunities which are there for our own people. And these, to me, are the issues which really need to come out very clear in the bill. And the bill has tried really to do that. The issue of appeal, when, for example, when you are denied the status of a refugee in a country, then the appeal process is also well captured in the bill. How do you go about to make sure that even as you are denied that opportunity, then you don't seem to be really being denied just for the sake of it, that there are serious reasons why you should be denied. And there are a number of other advisory bodies in the bill in terms of how this thing should be addressed. And I really like what Honorable Millie was saying, that there are gaps. And what I would recommend, Honorable Speaker, even as we move forward with this bill, is that then such issues, if Honorable Millie could document, because I belong to that committee, if this could be documented so that we compare them versus what other bodies have submitted, because we got a lot of submissions. And actually this bill has gone through many circles in the process of ensuring that we don't leave anybody behind. But it is not easy, Honorable Speaker, I must confess, it is not easy to get a refugee bill which you can say is perfect, because the interests are so many that you must accommodate some and others just seem like you're accommodating partially, not fully. So even as I support Honorable Speaker, I think there is still room to improve, And I want to encourage honorable members to look at the bill, and where they think there are gaps, push those gaps forward so that as we go to the third reading, Honorable Speaker, then we'll have factored most of these concerns and ensure that we have a refugees bill or act which will safeguard the interests of refugees, but at the same time, safeguard the interests of Kenyans who are the host community. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Chapkut. What is the number of your seat?
324, Madam Speaker. 324. Madam Speaker, I arise to support this bill, number 62. From the onset, it is indeed a clear bill that is going to ensure management and organization of refugees in our country. Committee of National for Administration and Security, it is my heartfelt congratulations to thank you, because you ensured that public participation, according to the Constitution, Article 118, was followed. Public input was indeed collected, and I have no doubt in my mind that bold regulations should be followed. Madam Speaker, I just want to mention something that in my own constituency, that is Ainapoi constituency, Kapsoya town is in CPD of Eldoret town. We have more than 5,000 refugees from southern Sudan, and there's a global pandemic. And it is indeed, Madam Speaker, a crisis that has never been witnessed by mankind. But I thank Kenyans for following the measures that has been instituted. All I'm trying to say, Madam Speaker, is that Kenya, 75% of the total population are young people. They've not been employed. So let's only accommodate these refugees. Let's follow, I want them to follow the rules of law and order. And I want them to be friendly, to perfect coexistence, relationships, and live in peace. But having said that, Madam Speaker, in my own constituency, as opposed to other areas, they are living in peace. We've intermarriage. There's perfect coexistence. All I want other refugees in our country, especially Kaguma, and so on and so forth, is that I want them to follow the regulations, to follow laws, and to follow order. Because they can come and instill their own culture in our own country. At the same time, I want them, their definition is not well defined. I want in the near future, in their definitions, I want promotion of coexistence be spelled out properly. And in the intermarriages, you know, when you are born in Kenya, you will be allowed to get citizenship and so on and so forth because of being born in Kenya. So, Madam Speaker, the legal framework is perfect. the legal framework is excellent. The Committee of National Administration and Security have done a great job, Madam Speaker. So I support without any reservation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Kingola Macau, member for Mavoko.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute on this bill, Refugees Bill number 62. Madam Speaker, I can't agree more with members who are in agreement that when you look at the refugees in Kenya, Madam Speaker, we must strike a balance between those who are under UNHCR. Madam Speaker, I have seen in Kakuma and Dadaab members who are registered by UNHCR centers. They kind of live within their laws, but they don't adhere to the Kenyan laws, though there is a lot of law breaking. And when I looked at this bill, Madam Speaker, the committee is trying to address some of those things. Madam Speaker, again, we should look at the welfare of the refugees versus our locals. It's true, Madam Speaker, sometimes how refugees are treated in this country preferably is better than our locals. And I think that causes a lot of discomfort among the locals. It encourages our people to want and go even be registered in those refugee camps. Madam Speaker, and sometimes, you know, recently, when I looked at how countries were voting for and against Kenya during the UN Security Council, I was disappointed to see the countries that we have hosted all this long, Ethiopia, Somalia, they were against us. So I was wondering, does Kenya do bad by hosting their people? Madam Speaker, I think sometimes white men or Englishmen say, scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's high time that we also favor our Kenyans, because if they cannot favor us at a time of need, then who are we to treat their people good and they cannot reciprocate? Madam Speaker, however, it is important to note, through countries with capacity to handle refugee professionalism and tap it, I have seen in the Scandinavian countries, they really have tapped into the capacities of these refugees. So we cannot equate Kenya, which is a developing country, with those countries, because we are in competition of the available resources. So I think it's important, even as we make laws that govern refugees, even considering human rights. Madam Speaker, we are at a time and a place where Kenya is trying to take off economically. And I think we should safeguard what we have so that the generations and the youth of this country should occupy those opportunities before even us engaging outsiders. So, Madam Speaker, I cannot agree more with this bill that provides the balance between locals and the refugees. And Madam Speaker, I am sure we have experts in this House who will bring amendments. I'll also look at it so that if there is anything that I feel will disadvantage Kenyans and will cause bad blood between our refugees and our Kenyans, then we'll bring it to this House and maybe carry it forward in its final reading. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. I support.
Honorable Murugara Gitonga.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this bill. The bill is actually timely. We need to look into the issues of refugees in the country with some form of finality. Kenya has hosted refugees for quite a long time, almost since independence. As turmoil ravaged through Africa, and the people had to move and be accommodated in other countries where there was peace. However, Madam Speaker, there is a notion, especially amongst the communities that are hosting refugees, that refugees are actually treated better than our citizens. That in fact they live better lives. They may be lives of supply,
without much work, but this is because of the sort of laws we have in the country. I was privileged to join the stakeholders while doing public participation in respect of this bill, and I visited Kakuma refugee camp, which is itself a refugee camp. Then there was another settlement called Kalobey, which was meant to actually move the refugees from the initial status to some status akin to becoming Kenyans. This bill will deal with the registration, reception, and registration of refugees, which is very important, because we also know that there are criminals who commit atrocities in their country and they find refuge in our country. We must be able to vet so that we only give refugee status to those who qualify. This bill also forms institutions that will govern the discharge of duties pertaining to refugees. This is very important. But most important must be a provision to fund those institutions. Because the complaint we have is that there is no money set aside for the relevant ministry by the government to fund activities of such agencies. This bill should address this. Let me touch on the rights of refugees as enshrined in this bill, that they will have rights almost similar to those of Kenyans, including right to education, right to work, and many other human rights. And I agree fully that refugees are human beings. We must treat them with dignity, we must treat them with respect, we must accord to them what is due. However, while we try to integrate refugees into our society, we must not lose track of the fact that Kenyan citizens carry the primary role, citizenship is paramount, and that we must at least treat our citizens first and foremost before we go to refugees. When it comes to work, we know there is acute shortage of work in the country. Unemployment is ravaging our country. So as we consider refugees to work, we must bear in mind that we have tens, in fact not tens, but hundreds of thousands of young people in the country who have no jobs. Graduates from universities, from technical training institutes, from colleges who are jobless. So we must protect these ones first. When it comes to education, we must also look at the form of education we are giving to our citizens before we go to refugees. Because we know very well that in some even counties in Kenya, the level of education is wanting, the infrastructure in schools is wanting, and many others. We must also talk about the international community, which comes in to aid refugees. As they do this, primary importance must go to the host countries. As they sort out refugee problems, let's also look at what problems we indigenous Kenyans have, which this community must take into consideration, including what is good for us and what is good for refugees. So while I support this bill, there is a lot more to be is going to be investigated and interrogated, and we will be discussing this at the committee stage. Madam Speaker, I support.
Very well. Let's have the member for Seme, Dr. Nyika. Honorable.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to discuss this. Madam Speaker, the issue of refugees is a big problem in the country. In this country, we actually have about 500,000 people who are living as refugees, mostly from Somalia and South Sudan. And we have huge refugee camps. In fact, Dadaab, which has most of the refugees, and Kakuma, and some of us may know, Kakuma is actually the largest refugee camp in the world. So it is a big problem that we have. Worldwide, we have about 25 million people who are walking around as refugees and without status. Not just the numbers, Madam Speaker, but we also have problems that will be cost of looking after them, the security issues that come with the refugees, the health issues, the human rights issues, and therefore it's an issue that needs to be looked at carefully. Good, this bill actually looked at recognition, protection of refugees, and gives effect to the international conventions we have signed into, like the UN one, the OAU one, but most importantly, Madam Speaker, it is the structures that the bill has put in place. The bill has put in place very important structures, starting with a department within the public service. That makes sure that it's actually the department that is there to stay, it will be funded and easy to supervise. It has an advisory committee which actually advises the Commissioner for Refugees, and it has a status appeal committee, and it has a panel that looks at the issue of refugees. But, Madam Speaker, what has come out that I think we need to look at in this is actually the Commissioner for Refugees and the Minister have a lot of discretion throughout this bill, that actually if we do not find structures that will curtail some of these or put in place processes, probably the appeal committee will do that. But it is something that I've looked at in the bill throughout. There's a lot of authority that is given to the minister and the commissioner for the commissioner. The other thing that it is not clear in this bill, and I think we can look at it, the relationship between the advisory committee and the commissioner. Looking at it superficially, you realize that the commissioner is working under the advisory committee, but you don't see a clear structural relationship. And my concern is that later on in future, there may actually be a conflict between them. The other issue that I noted is the composition of the committee. It's purely a government committee, and as Honorable Millie had said, we actually need to include the civil society and even the religious organizations in that. The appeal committee replaces the act, the board, the appeal board that is in the act. Again, it is solely appointed by the minister, and you do not get any representation from the civil society, the religious organizations. So again, that's an issue that we need to look at it. However, it establishes a proper process of application, process of eligibility, and the eligibility panel is actually an important panel that advises the commissioner. There are very good provisions in this bill, like in clause 16, screening people for health, but it does not go ahead to say, after you screen them, what do you do? The protection of women, people with disability, is actually very good. But as Honorable Millie said, the exclusion for consideration just because you have applied to another country, I think is not correct. It should be that you have actually been given asylum in another country. So, Madam Speaker, you find that it defines the establishment of designated areas and the settlement officers that actually looks after these areas and the protection of how you get into.
The Honorable Kiai. Honorable Kiai in the House?
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Oh, you're seated in an unlikely position.
Today I'm in the opposition, but I have not shifted. Madam Speaker, I want to appreciate, and I'm seated next to my classmate, Millie Athiambo. I stand to support this bill. And Madam Speaker, this bill is an improvement on the Act of Parliament that is already in place. But I would want to say some 2-3 things, other than what Honorable Millie has said. You realize that this is an issue that brings about that delicate balance between human rights and national interests. Madam Speaker, Kenya as it is, hosts some of the largest refugee camps in the world, be it Kakuma or Dadaab. And therefore, the issue of refugee, the problem of refugee in Kenya is such a big one. And therefore, we need to have a law that governs and manages refugees in Kenya. Some of the issues that are raised here really goes into the security of this country, because issues of refugees also overflow into security issues, and they need proper law to manage them. Madam Speaker, if you look at the law, which I've had a chance to look at, I had the privilege of being in the jailer committee, and we visited those refugee camps, both in Dadaab and Kakuma. You will see that when the refugees come into our country, there is that competition for resources. And some of the issues we picked in those refugee camps are like the refugees are treated better than the locals. The refugees are given better working and job opportunities than the locals. The refugees are always treated better by the law than the locals. Indeed, the facilities that they enjoy, be it the schools that are donor funded, the hospitals and the like, they are better than the existing one. And therefore, we need to have a law that will govern those issues before they become an insecurity issue. The friction of culture is also another issue. You realize that when they congregate somewhere, the refugees move with their culture, which sometimes is incompatible with the local culture. And those issues also generate a lot of animosity between the locals and the refugees. But all is not lost. I realize that this act has a very huge chunk about integration. Refugees being humans, they also need to be integrated into the proper local system, either by making sure that they are given safe refuge out there and integrated in those local societies or in the country here. The section about integration talks about what happens in a situation whereby two refugees reproduce a kid who is stateless. What is the status of that kid who is born by two refugees? Or what happens when a local marries that refugee and they have kids? What is the status of those kids? Because the law as it is, they cannot become Kenyan citizens. In other places like in America, the moment you are born in their country, then you become an automatic citizen. We need to look at such issues. The issue of asylum also needs also to be addressed. Because when you arrive in Kenya, for example, and you apply for asylum locally, then you are also in conflict with the immigration laws, and most likely you are going to be returned back as a citizen, as a person who is needed in Kenyan soil. So we need to reconcile the Refugee Act, also with the Immigration Act, also with the Penal Code, and also with the international conventions to ensure that the Refugee Act, once it is debated on and agreed on, is not in conflict with the existing laws. Otherwise, it will be shut down. I stand to support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Mauka Maure.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this very important bill. This is a bill that should have been enacted on the eve of the Somali fall. We have been having the unfortunate kind of credit of having to neighbor a failed state for close to 34 years, for nearly 30 years, because actually it's now 29 years, since 1991. Madam Speaker, it is important to note that the definition of a refugee and the status that one enters into as somebody who is running away from conflict or violence or persecution, and the reality that
when you are refugees, if you are repatriated back to your homeland, there is a threat to your life in very many ways. And that is usually the difference between somebody who is seeking asylum and somebody who is seeking refugee status. Now, when you look at Africa, we are only second to Ethiopia in terms of volume of the refugees that we host. So for us, as a country, the one refugee should actually ring a bell to everybody. And for that reason, you've seen how the influx, especially of the Somali citizens, who came, and they came in two different categories. There are those women and children who are vulnerable. They were concentrated in camps. There are those who want money. They came and actually transformed, for example, the lifestyle of Nairobi. When you find that in most estates where they occupied, they were tripling the prices of houses, both rental and purchase. So when we actually have this scenario of refugees, and this bill has come at the right time, let's say it is late, but this is the right time. Madam Speaker, we know when the UN was defining the life of a refugee, the UN Security Agency that actually caters for refugees, it was specifically to help the Europeans who had been displaced by World War II. And for that reason, that's why you find the protection of a refugee is quite a serious affair, because it involved the Europeans. Now that the Europeans are far away from that plague, now it is as Africans and most of the other developing countries, you can see Bangladesh, what they are, for example, going through with the Rohingya and the others. And the Middle East, the displacement of the war. So, Madam Speaker, when we talk about a refugee, it's a human being like you and me. And it is for that reason, when we have this piece of legislation trying to define and protect refugees, it could not have come at a better time than this time. We need, as a country, to integrate those refugees who are within our borders and provide them with the facilities, even near where they are settled. We know the UN, there's big money. Those who know about those cartels of the UN and others, the money involved is big. And for that reason, that's why you find the facilities at the refugee camp are usually better than with the communities nearby. But we should always respect, with a lot of dignity, those people who are at the fortunate status of being a refugee. And with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to support this bill.
Member for Kasarani, Honorable Mercy Gakuya.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the Refugees Bill 2019. I'll start by saying nobody chooses to be a refugee. It happens because of the issues surrounding, most of the time, maybe the neighboring countries. It is good we put things in order, because most of the times the locals, they find the refugees as a security threat. I'll give an example, like Kasarani constituency. We have almost 10,000 Congolese, and you find most of the complaints at the administration office or at the DCC office, Kasarani, is about the refugees. Within the estate, you find the locals are not able to accommodate them. So when we have a bill which will enable that the law and order is maintained, or there will be harmony between the refugees and the locals, it will be in order. And usually say today is this country, tomorrow is another country. We cannot compare ourselves with countries like Germany, who are hosting a lot of refugees from Syria in millions. So the few or the many a country would host, it's good we have law and order in place. It's high time we ensure that our locals will not see like the refugees have come to grab their resources. As it has been cited in the House, that sometimes you find they have more privileges. Not that they have more privileges, it's because maybe they have more resources in terms of money. They're able to purchase, and through like marriage, you find one is able to be a citizen. So it's high time as a country we support this bill so that we live in harmony, as we know that when our locals feel threatened, it will be difficult to convince our locals that we are not hosting for a particular advantage. So I support this bill, and we hope that various estates, especially in Nairobi County, some have Sudanese, others from Rwanda, and like I've given an example for our place in Kasarani, we have Congolese. And sometimes when you go to the estate, you find the local men are not really complaining about the women who are refugees. They only complain about men. Like during the road construction, they say the men are grabbing the casual works because casual labor, they usually most of the time not ask for their IDs. They just represent themselves, or whoever is present is accommodated. And you find they are given some casual jobs. So the complaint we have in our offices is these people from this country are coming to take our jobs. But when you go to the women, like in the local churches there, the men, they say women have no problem. So I don't think we need to be accommodating one gender over the other. We need to make sure that whatever is being said should be right and correct, so that we accommodate them as a family. And as when I was starting, I said no one chooses to be a refugee. So it's high time we ensure that all the matters which are supposed or are surrounding the refugee bill are ensured that they cater, even if it's not overall, at least we live in harmony, so that our people will not see that these refugees have come to grab our resources or to take our peace or to take our security. I support the bill.
Well said. Let's have the member for Tesson North, Honorable Kaunya Oku.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to support this bill. I am a member of the National Administration and Security Committee of the National Assembly. And I want to support the sentiments that our chairman gave. And to add that one of the things we found out when going out to the field, especially when we visited Kakuma and Dadaab, we found that the number of refugees we have in this country is quite big. The total of 474,044 refugees in total. And of course, we found that out of the voluntary repatriation, only 1,473 were repatriated. And therefore, this bill, Madam Speaker, is key in helping us, the country, manage the refugees in terms of their recognition and protection, and indeed the registration. Madam Speaker, one of the issues that we encountered was the question of encampment policy. This is a policy where refugees throughout the world for a long time are kept within a camp for control purposes. This trend now of encampment policy is changing, where countries are adopting integration policies. But this integration policy, which I think in this act, in this particular bill, is being addressed by giving the minister the powers to make certain regulations so that at different levels of refugee admission, registration, they can then be granted at a certain stage some resettlement depending on the level. The reason for this is partly the balance between security, Madam Speaker, and the issue of human rights or the rights of refugees, the right to employment, the right to settlement, and all that. We, as a country, and all countries worldwide, look at their national security first. And secondly, they look at the rights of their citizens. And of course, they look at the rights of the refugees who come to the country. So this particular aspect of encampment is something that needs to be strongly considered, especially for genuine refugees that have gone through time and have been vetted properly. We had a case, Madam Speaker, in Dadaab, where a young man was born in 1991 after the refugee influx in Dadaab, and he schooled there, and we met him and he gave a testimony. He remained in the camp and he was now 28 years old. So of course this law and the country has to decide how do we deal with those cases where a child is born and is a refugee. Really there are certain rights that have to be guaranteed within the law. Madam Speaker, the other aspects members have actually ventilated on the issue that this particular bill is meant partly to align our act, the management of refugee. We had the Refugee Act number 13 of 2006, which was not aligned to the 2010 Constitution. So partly this bill will seek to align that to the 2010 Constitution, which had several changes, including the titles of minister, which is now the CS. Lastly, Madam Speaker, I support this bill, particularly because it has provided for all the institutional arrangements, right from the department which will be domiciled, the Department of Registration, and we have also several other provisions for
Member for Ijara, Honorable Sophia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this. And I come from a county that hosts refugees, and I've had a lot of experience with the refugees and in this country, and it has been very difficult for even us as the host community, because there were, you know, when they came 30 years ago, we did not have any structured system of engagement, and there was no preparedness. Nobody was expecting that kind of a problem in our neighboring country, and we did not have specific laws that could address issues of refugees. So what happened was, when they came, and it became really hassle for the communities, and it became now, and they themselves had to go out to destroy the environment, to destroy everything that was there, so that they could get even themselves something. For firewood, our environment was completely destroyed as a county. Our wildlife were completely destroyed, and there was security problems all over. So it was really something that affected both the host community and the refugees. And that I really appreciate now that we are coming up with an act of parliament which objective is to provide for recognition of the refugees, their protection, and their management. in line with the 1951 United Nations Convention relating to the status of refugees, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are several protocols. The African Union Protocol, and that specifically address the aspect of refugee problems in Africa. And those are the things that our Act of Parliament today have recognized, and it has taken into account in line with the conventions that we have ratified as a country, is what we are appreciating today. And Madam Speaker, usually there are rights rights and duties to every person in any given situation. Even you, when you go as a visitor, not even a refugee, you go to a country, you must abide by the visas that you are given and the rules under those visas that you go through. So I really appreciate that this act has clearly brought out the duties and the rights of refugees who are seeking assembly in Kenya. And those duties and those rights are already in the United Nations Convention, which we are members, which we have ratified some of those United Nations conventions, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if an enabling situation is given, the refugees will be able to contribute heavily in terms of our economic and social development of this country. Look, I want to give you an example. I've gone to America and particularly went to Minnesota. Minnesota, we have more than 150 million Somali refugees in Minnesota. And the kind of business and engagement they're doing and the way they have turned around the economical aspect of Minnesota, it has gone down into history, in the American history, because they are contributing huge tax returns to the government, which in turn is used for development, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is the right time. We are doing the right thing. And when you are doing the right thing, it gives that issues. So I'm asking, once we have the refugees, then it is important that we facilitate the refugees, give them proper documentations, both at the two levels of government, at the national level and at the county level. Once we integrate the refugees and give them the opportunity to be part and parcel of this country, and particularly to be able to coexist.
You've made your point, Honorable Sophia. Let's have the member for Lagdera, Honorable Garane Hire. Oh, you're on that side.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, from the onset, I wish to thank the committee and commend them for a good job. The refugee bill has come at the right time. Madam Speaker, the issue of, refugee is a global phenomenon. And with the large displacements that's happening all over the world, it's likely that it will increase. Madam Speaker, this refugee problem, which is a global scenario, requires us to have proper laws to address it. Kenya has been hosting refugees for the last 30 years. And Madam Speaker, it is somehow embarrassing that 30 years later, we are talking of having laws to address these issues. These laws should have come at the beginning of the refugee problem. Madam Speaker, the global problem of refugee is not only, unique to Kenya, but Kenya, being the country that hosts, I think, the largest, if not second largest, refugees, should be a trendsetter in having proper laws. Madam Speaker, I represent a constituency that neighbors the largest refugee complex in the world. That is the Dadaab refugee camp. And being a neighbor to that, complex, I have first-hand information of, the life in refugee camps. It is not a good thing. And there is this perception that refugees are generally people, or refugees are generally lesser humans. It is not the case. Nobody wishes to be a refugee. It's a natural process. That just came, to those, people, and it can come to anybody. God forbid. What is happening now in Ethiopia, that, tension and, demonstrations and killings, if it were to spill, I don't think the neighboring countries are prepared to handle it. So, Madam Speaker, having these laws is a very critical issue. Now, coming back to the bill itself, this is a good bill, but at least there are some critical issues that I expected it to address. One of it is the issue of integration. In the issue of integration, it doesn't come out clearly. For instance, keeping people in camps. There are so many countries that accept refugees in this world, including Germany, including Turkey, and the population is large. Those people are not put in camps. Those people, there are proper, policies and laws that allows the host countries to integrate them to be part of the society. Because if you allow these people to, live within society, most of the issues, whether it is insecurity, whether it is competition for resources, we will not be talking about. When you go to Dadaab, there are, or even globally, there are about 400 refugees. These are ready markets for people. And then, Madam Speaker, finally, and I recommend the committee, I want to advise the committee to look into the global comprehensive refugee framework. That is a very, important declaration made by the 193 members of the United Nations. It specifically calls for greater support for countries that are hosting, or the host communities. It's calling them support in terms of financial, in terms of, helping them to see how they can really, integrate with the host communities. Thank you, Madam. And Madam Speaker, finally, what I want to say is that I'm sure we'll have some sort of amendments when this bill comes to the committee of the whole House. But the critical...
Gaki, wawezaje kunitwangia simu saa hii Gaki? Saa zile tu nimewekelea matoke yangu kwa meza. Niko tayari kukula, wewe ukikula kwako mimi ukusumbua. Gaki, hii simu sisiki yake ya nani? Mimi ukusumbua ukikula kwako. Basi wewe ngoja nimalize matoke yangu tena utanitwangia.
Kupata matoke, bonyeza *811 *965#. Bonyeza *811 *965#.
Kwenye Darubini hii leo.
This is not a process of trying to get kura for one person, one MCA, one MP, one whoever. No. This is a process of ensuring that we assist the most vulnerable in our society during this particular period.
Hakuna kuingiza siasa kwenye mpango wa kazi mtaani, aonya Rais Uhuru Kenyatta.
The MD Kebs, yes, he was arrested in the morning, and it was simple.
we wanted certain documents on a certain case that we are investigating, and I think he was not cooperative. And the law is very clear that if you don't cooperate in any investigation, we can compel you to give information through the legal mechanism.
Mkurugenzi mkuu wa shirika la kukadiria ubora wa bidhaa Bernard Njiraini ahojiwa kuhusu madai ya ufisadi katika shirika hilo.
COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the vulnerability of people living with non-communicable diseases, and hence the ministry, in collaboration with the county governments, has put up measures to ensure that non-communicable disease clinics remain operational during this period.
Na Wakenya walio na maradhi sugu wametakiwa kuzingatia ratiba ya matibabu na lishe bora.
Jumapili hii kwenye runinga ya KBC, ungana naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu kuanzia saa 1 hadi saa 2 asubuhi.
Ningetaka nikwambie, our Jehovah God, because the Bible says he is the same yesterday, today and forevermore. He is able to take you to a place of abundance. He is able to take you to Rehoboth in the name of Jesus Christ.
Kipindi ni neno la neema, ukiletewa naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu. Usikose.
Wewe pereka huko. Unajua ni wewe tumetoa hapa ushamba juzi. Basi tafutani mwingine mmuta uzaba. Wewe digidhia wewe.
Najua jambo lako wewe kulala ina mental hospital